Right. We're going.
I'm off. Right, okay. I'm Eve Kennedy and my talk is on learning to learn. So I based this talk on my blog, which was basically about how we learn to learn and, in a way, how, to an extent, how we are taught. So I don't know about anyone else, but after the seminar last week for this module, I was really nervous because I've never been taught in this way before, and in a way we're teaching ourselves. We're in charge of the way we want to learn. And like I said, I've never took part in this kind of learning experience before. I've always been told, right, you need to learn this and you need to do this to be able to get the grade. But my perspective on this type of learning changed after I started to prepare my blog, and I thought I may come to like this kind of learning. So, like I said, I'm going to discuss how we're taught and how we learn, and in that I'll involve active learning and passive learning. Okay, so at the beginning of my talk, of my blog, I discussed the VAK testing survey, which assesses what your learning style is. It's a free survey which is accessed online, and I think it was late secondary school I was told this could be a really helpful tool to know how you prefer to learn and, in a way, know which is the best way to learn to help you in your education. And it aims to find whether you have a dominant style of learning. So, are you a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner? But the problem with this survey is it's self-report, so it might not be completely accurate, and not everyone has a dominant learning style. We can have a combined learning style, so we could have two areas, so you could be a mix of visual and auditory kind of learner. And also this learning style can change over time, so like in primary school and like in reception classes, we're taught to learn through kinesthetic type learning, to explore what we're doing and explore the world around us in order to to learn. But then as we progress through primary school, more visual techniques are used to aid our learning, and when we get to university it's more auditory based and lecture styles, so we're relying on our auditory skills to be able to learn, but not everyone learns in this way, so would it be better to have a combination of these styles so everyone can benefit? And because we're restricted in schools of which style to use, we don't always have the chance to express our learning style or preference and benefit the most in education. So learning is a natural process. Everyone starts learning from birth in one way or another, and there are people who learn without any schooling at all and are just as successful. I looked at some research by Barbara Rogoff, I think that's how you say it, who conducted research in Indian villages with children as young as 2 years old, and I think she observed them until they were about 8 or 10 years old. And she watched, she found out that children as young as 2 watched their parents in order to learn, by mimicking their actions and imitating what they're doing. And she also found that parents, especially mothers, provide corrective feedback and assess the learning process as they go along, to know whether they're ready to move on to the next stage. Similar research conducted by Moerk, I think that's how you say it, in 1990 he observed that parents provide corrective and reliable reinforcement to infants when they're producing their first verbal utterances. So that is another way reinforcement is important in helping the learning process. Okay, next slide, please. So this is a quick table of the difference between active and passive learning. So the examples I've just given, which are natural learning processes, are an example of active learning. And with active learning, we have to put in the effort to be able to get anything out. So in this module, we've got to go out and find research and look into the areas we're interested in to be able to get anything out and learn anything. Also, with active learning, discussion and involvement is vital. Because if we don't discuss with others and find out other people's viewpoints, then we're not going to be able to build on the information we're finding. Active learning is completely different to the lecture styles. In lectures, we're to sit and listen to an hour or two or whatever the allotted time is and take in and hopefully remember what we've learned. But that doesn't mean that lectures can't be adapted to include active learning aspects. You could have things like breaks in between lectures, and some of them breaks be discussions included in the lecture to discuss the material you've just looked at. And then if from that discussion people don't understand the material, to go back over it and try and help people understand it. So like I say, with passive learning, it's more lecture styles, and we're expected to sit and listen to content for a certain amount of time. And then we're expected to regurgitate this information in exams, but that doesn't tell us whether we've just memorized it or whether we've understood it. We could memorize lecture content like people memorize dates of things. It doesn't mean you necessarily understand it. So I questioned whether it was enough to just have passive learning, because anyone who knows how to drive, you need to know the theory behind driving and pass a theory test to then be able to learn the practical side of it. But you can't, passive learning and the theory test isn't enough to be able to, right, I've passed that theory test, I can go out and drive a car. It doesn't work like that. So it is a combination of the two that is the best way forward, I think. So I then found another experiment that was in a book, actually, and they compared the two types of learning to see if they got better results from one or the other. So people who took part were assigned to two groups. So there was two conditions: the active one, which was a more interactive session, and the passive one where they were just to sit and listen to the content. The content in both was the same content but delivered in a different way. So in the active learning one, people only had to listen for 30 minutes and then were interactive for the other time. But in the passive one, it was a 1 hour delivery of content. There were improvements in knowledge in both of the conditions, but the results were not significantly different from each other. So they didn't do better in one than they did in the other. But people that were observing the participants taking part in these sessions and self-report measures showed that people in the active and interactive sessions were more engaged and had to engage more in order to get anything out of it. So in conclusion, there isn't much evidence at the moment to say which one is best, but there are advantages to both. Personally, I think a combination of the two would be the best way, because like everyone has their own way of learning, and if you changed everything to active learning, then the people who prefer to learn in a passive way aren't going to benefit from that. But I do think like active learning does enable people to be more confident, and they're encouraged more to speak out. And I think we should try and include this method in more educational settings, like in primary schools at a younger age, to build on this confidence from the beginning. So, any questions?
not so much a question, but you said at the end that there isn't much evidence, but like if this is something you want to explore, like in my project this year we're doing the testing effect, which is basically like one way of applying like that sort of like active engagement in sort of an educational context. So like if you wanted to explore that, look up the testing effect and like the generation effect and have a read about that, because that actually does show some evidence that like what you're doing actually works and is more effective for learning.
Right. So the comment was that it wasn't a question, but that the testing effect, research from that area shows that more active learning can benefit people. So if you want to find out more, and if I want to find out more, then research the testing effect. Thank you.